All right, guys, let's get into 2012 Subaru Legacy timing belt. Got a bunch of cameras set up. Let's get this thing going. All right, here we go. So we're going to take off the shroud for the belts, and then obviously we're going to loosen the tension to get that belt out of the way. Next, we're going to take these fans out. You want to take the coolant reservoir out. Make sure you unplug the fans before you pull it out so you don't rip the harness for the fans. Now we're going to start taking that V-bracket off that sits on the front of the motor. That acts as a motor mount. It goes to a dampener on the front of the rad support, lower rad support, and we're just going to basically take that off, so it's definitely going to be in our way if we don't. Alright, we're going to loosen up that crank pulley. Sometimes these get stuck. Now, it took me a little bit of wiggling to get this one off. You don't want to pry against a timing cover because you will crack it. And then once you get that off, we're going to start taking off these timing cover bolts. They basically follow the entire length of the timing cover. They're on the top and the bottom. Some of them have shoulders and some of them do not. Just make sure you don't lose any of those bolts. Now we're going to loosen this tensioner up, get that thing out of the way so we can start taking our timing belt off. And now we're just going to pull our thermostat housing out, 210 millimeters. Make sure you have a bucket to catch the coolant, because as soon as you take that off, coolant is going to start to come out. It's not going to come out immediately fast until you take the thermostat all the way out, but it is going to start to spill out. Now I'm going to let this drain. I open the radiator cap just to let everything flow a little easier, and then I'm going to pop the thermostat out. Now once you pop that thermostat out, it is going to flow out pretty hard. You can see just with me covering the hole for the thermostat, it does shoot pretty far. So the water is going to rush out. Make sure you have something collected, a bucket or a drain pan or whatever. As you can see, I made a little bit of a mess, but a little oil draw to take care of that.
There's no good way to get the water pump and thermostat out without, yeah.
Now I'm going to start on undoing the bolts for the water pump. This can be a little tricky. Some of the bolts are kind of hard to get to. A 10 millimeter and a small extension will be able to, get in there. That's what I'm using, and that worked fine for me. Now just remember, when you're going to take this off, there is a hose attached to the side of the water pump, and you're going to have to undo the clamp. If it's a turbo model, there's 2 hoses, so just keep in mind this is a regular NA, so this only has 1 hose. You can see that fitting right on the side of the water pump there. And I was able to just grab that with some pliers and twist it a little bit, get it loose while it's still mounted. And then as soon as I get those last bolts out, I'll be able to take that hose off. Now we're going to start opening up our pulleys. I replace all the pulleys because a lot of times the bearings fail, and that ends up being ultimately what takes out the belt. I mean, I have seen a few belts fail, but more than not, it's always the pulleys that fail. So I always replace those. They get torqued to about 45 foot-pounds, and then you're good to go. Now I like to get my tensioner ready, get the belt set up, start to line everything up, because it can be a little tricky getting that tensioner in there. Sometimes it's tough, but what I like to do is wrap everything, get everything set up, and have the tensioner nearby, so once I get that belt on and all my marks are lined up, that I can just slip it right in there. Now you can see in the top corner, those white lines are what we're lining up, and they line up with the valve cover and where the head meet. And basically I'm going to use a 17mm wrench, get these lined up, crank it over while holding it with one hand, and then with the other hand what I'm going to do is grab the tensioner while I'm holding the belt and then start to thread it in. Now this can be the tricky part. It definitely can take a little bit of practice. I've done this a few times, so I kind of know how to do it, but definitely want to have that tensioner nearby. You don't want to have to stop and go get it, or else a lot of people, what they'll do is they'll clamp the belt down. I don't like to do that because it can damage the belt, and you can easily do it with your hands once you learn. Going back together with everything, and you want to make sure that when you put your fans in that you do plug them back in. If not, your car is going to overheat, and obviously that's the last thing that you need after you've just done a big job like this. You don't want to mess up your motor, so make sure that after you put those fans in, you do plug the fans back in. They're going to be on the bottom right hand and the bottom left hand side, that's right here, and make sure they click all the way in. And see how mine popped out. Make sure they don't pop out. If you can pull it back out, it didn't snap in all the way. That piece right there, you want to push it down, and you'll be able to tell immediately whether it's in all the way or not. Now we're going to get our belt back on. This can be tricky. Just, you can draw a label of how it went back together if you can't remember, or you think you're not going to be able to remember. You can also look it up on the internet. That's available too. Alright, let's see if this thing blows up. And she's good to go.